Why do I have to take you with us? We're going on a family trip. You're not my real family, so you're staying behind. Kyle's words left Ryan in disbelief. It had been just a few months since Steve, who had been adopted as a child, passed away. Ryan, orphaned by his parents, was taken in by my biological son Kyle and his wife. Kyle, who had always looked down on Steve, had come to rely on him after I refused to provide financial assistance. Out of gratitude, Kyle took in the remaining Ryan. However, Kyle's words were a complete lie. His real aim was to exploit Ryan's vulnerable state after losing his parents and take everything from him. For Kyle and his wife, Ryan's existence was nothing but a nuisance after they had swindled his inheritance. They trampled on Ryan's heart with sweet words of being real family only to discard him like this. When I visited Kyle's house, I found Ryan crying in a dimly lit room. "Where are your dad and mom?" I searched for my son and his wife, but they were nowhere to be found. Confused, Ryan muttered through sobs. "They said they're going to Hawaii with family only." That's how I came to learn about the treatment Ryan had been subjected to. Using a child to fulfill their desires and then hurting his heart, my son and his wife were beyond forgiveness. I see, if that's the case. I decided, embracing Ryan, who looked up at me with teary red eyes. I was determined to make Kyle and his family experience the betrayal they had inflicted. My name is Holly. I'm a 58-year-old part-time employee at a local supermarket. I've been living alone in the house my husband left behind after he passed away 20 years ago. Just as he had entered his 40s, a time when he should have been in the prime of his working life. He always cared for his health, but an unexpected illness was discovered during a company health checkup. Treatment began immediately under a doctor's supervision. However, the disease progressed faster than we had anticipated. Within a year, my husband was gone. The sudden event shocked me and our two sons. Steve, our adopted son, took it particularly hard, spending days without eating or drinking in his grief. Although not our biological child, we had cared for Steve since he was very young, after his biological mother could no longer raise him. Even though he wasn't our biological child, we had cared for him since he was very young. Perhaps because of that, Steve accepted us without any resistance. Although Kyle was our eldest son, we loved both of them just the same. Despite knowing about his origins, Steve bonded well with us, willingly helping out around the house. Although despised by the selfish Kyle, Steve always acted cheerfully, even towards him. My husband deeply loved the kind-hearted Steve and raised him as his own. The loss of my husband thus deeply affected Steve, causing us all great pain. For a while, Steve couldn't speak properly, but one day, he seemed to recover. Not that he had truly moved on, but he had accepted my husband's death and thought about what he could do next. Steve decided to support the remaining family members, me and Kyle. He dedicated himself to his studies, earning a scholarship to a national university. Despite his age, he continued to focus solely on his education. Eventually, Steve founded his own IT company in his 20s, quickly building a fortune. Around that time, Steve got married and had a son. Steve's wife was kind and caring, always looking out for me. My grandson, Ryan, was bright and gentle, much like Steve. Meanwhile, Kyle also married, and his daughter, Juliana, was born. Contrary to Steve's wife, Kyle's wife Yasmin was haughty and arrogant. Spoiled from birth, Juliana grew up selfish and inconsiderate. Despite having a daughter, Kyle frequently changed jobs due to his confrontational nature. He wouldn't hesitate to create problems, whether with his bosses or the company president. Despite his unstable employment, Yasmin's spending habits put a strain on their finances, often leading them to ask me for money. Given Juliana's situation, and unable to refuse them, I found myself providing financial support every time. This went on for nearly a decade, to the point where it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say I continued working part-time just for Kyle's family. When Steve found out, he wanted to help Kyle's family financially, offering to cover their expenses in my stead. I tried my best to stop him, knowing it was about Kyle and Yasmin. I feared they would take advantage of Steve's kindness and lead an even more extravagant life. When I told Steve, he suggested employing Kyle at his company as a way to help, at least. Kyle, disliking the idea of working under Steve, flatly rejected the offer. "Don't mock me! Why should I have to work under someone like you?" Steve had offered out of goodwill, but Kyle lashed out at him unreasonably. However, Steve proposed to bring Kyle on board on equal footing, which I strongly opposed. Yet, the company was prepared to accept this, saying, if it's the boss's request. Knowing Kyle's temperament, Steve took care of him alone to avoid burdening other employees. Despite being hired, there was little Kyle could actually do. He wouldn't make an effort to learn the work, and would throw a tantrum if something displeased him. Steve hired him, anticipating all these issues, so I wouldn't worry. Essentially, this was a way to support Kyle's family under the guise of employment. While I was troubled by Kyle's behavior, an event occurred that made me forget all about it. Steve and his wife were involved in a car accident and didn't make it back. Fortunately, Ryan wasn't there and remained unharmed. However, Ryan ended up losing both his parents at once. Though he was 12, he was still very much a child. His grief reminded me of Steve's from years ago. I intended to take Ryan in at my home. But then, something unexpected happened. Steve has always helped me out. I couldn't do anything until now, but I'll take Ryan in. Yasmin and I will raise him responsibly. Kyle pleaded to me with tears in his eyes. Moved by Kyle's offer, which was surprising given his previous arrogance and selfishness, I couldn't help but cry. Thinking that Steve's feelings had finally reached Kyle, I couldn't stop my tears. While respecting Ryan's wishes was paramount, he accepted Kyle's offer after seeing my reaction. He must have realized what he should do upon seeing me in tears. But Ryan's kindness and intelligence would soon be used against him. Sometime after Ryan became Kyle's adoptive son, a major incident occurred. Ryan was just 12, but sensed something was off and reached out to me. "Grandma, I know I shouldn't say this, but about Kyle. About Dad and Mom." Ryan chose his words carefully as he began to speak. For a while, Kyle and Yasmin seemed to warmly welcome and treat Ryan kindly. However, their attitude changed dramatically after a certain event. It was when Ryan's inherited estate was transferred to Kyle, his new guardian. Kyle and Yasmin exploited the vulnerability in Ryan's heart, taking control of the estate he inherited. Managing the entire estate was challenging for a child like Ryan, so it made sense for Kyle, the new guardian, to handle it. Ryan grew suspicious when Kyle insisted, "You don't need to tell Grandma," repeatedly. Moreover, since then, they have become harsher toward Ryan. Naturally, Ryan was worried about what would happen to the significant money left by his parents. "But please, don't say anything about this. It might be for my sake, or maybe I did something wrong." Indeed, if I confronted them now, it would be known that Ryan had confided in me. I reassured Ryan, telling him not to worry. "But please, if anything happens, contact me immediately. Don't suffer in silence if something bothers you." I wanted to believe Kyle was just being nervous, but recalling past events made me worried. However, as Ryan suggested, it might be best to watch the situation for a while. I decided to trust Kyle and his family and hung up the phone. Soon after, our hopes were cruelly trampled. Kyle, against all opposition, took over as president of the company Steve had founded. It was well known within the company that Ryan was to inherit the business eventually. However, Steve's kindness ironically accelerated Kyle's rampage. Sam, a longtime friend of Steve and co-founder of the company, came to visit me. Sam started talking with a grim expression. "The reason I came to see you today is to talk about Kyle." Kyle, courtesy of Steve's generosity, had a place in the company and naturally knew Sam. Steve intended for Kyle to hold a representative position in the company, thinking of him. He planned to protect the company until Ryan was ready to take over. I was supposed to take on that role in the meantime. Steve had mentioned to Sam that he wanted Ryan to eventually take over the company. Steve had no intention of actually leaving the company to Kyle. It was more about preserving Kyle's pride by giving him a position. But after Steve's passing, Kyle did not accept this arrangement. Ignoring Sam, who was the vice president, Kyle assumed the title of president as if it were his right, disregarding the plans for Ryan to inherit the company, and took everything from him. The company is now in a state of dictatorship under Kyle, with many employees saying they'll quit if things continue this way. Finding himself helpless, Sam came to me, Kyle's mother, seeking help. Kyle lacks the qualities to lead others. At this rate, Steve's company will soon go bankrupt. I doubt Kyle will listen to me now, but I can't just stand by. The only one who might stop Kyle now is me. I immediately headed to the company with Sam. From what I heard from Sam on the way, no one really respects Kyle. Despite not understanding the work, he constantly complains to other employees and is quite disliked. It's so typical of Kyle, I thought. Upon arrival, Sam informed Kyle of my visit. Kyle's first response to us was, "Do you have an appointment?" Filled with embarrassment and anger, I snatched the internal phone from Sam. "Enough is enough. Since when does a mother need an appointment to see her son?" I yelled so loud that the employees in the lobby went silent. After a moment of silence, the lobby returned to its usual bustle. "Fine. Have Sam show you in," Kyle said over the phone, not bothering to hide his irritation. By this point, Kyle must have realized that Sam had spoken to me. Kyle, waiting for us, was furious. But I couldn't just let Steve's company fall apart like this. Guided by Sam, I entered the president's office. "I'm not a child, you know. What are you thinking, barging into the company like this?" The tears Kyle shed, claiming Steve had helped him, were a lie. I was convinced of that the moment I saw Kyle. It was all an act to deceive Ryan and me. "That's my line. Are you planning to ruin the company Steve left for Ryan?" Kyle opened his mouth with a mocking smile. "Steve made me president, so what can I do?" Kyle must know that Steve only made him president in title to spare his feelings. But now that Steve is gone, it's impossible to outright deny it. As an outsider in this company, I can't remove Kyle from his position. It's unpredictable what will happen next with Kyle, who's incapable of proper work. Clinging to the presidency. Even though I know it's futile, I tried appealing to his emotions, but Kyle skillfully dodged. Because Steve said so, leaves Sam and me speechless. Feeling like we were getting nowhere, Sam eventually calmed me down after some back and forth. "Don't get too comfortable just because I can't fire you, Sam," Kyle spat out as we were leaving the president's office. We left without being able to say anything in return. Accomplishing nothing. All I could do was apologize to Sam, who had sought my help. After hearing from Sam that Kyle had taken some time off, I tried contacting Ryan, whom I had given a mobile phone out of concern after his consultation. But no matter how many times I called, there was no response from Ryan. After a series of rings, it just went to voicemail. Worried something had happened, I became restless, regretting that I had forgotten to contact Ryan earlier. I rushed to Kyle's house, plagued by a bad premonition. But there was no response to the doorbell. Had Ryan and Kyle's family gone somewhere? Lost in thought, I reached for the doorknob. To my surprise, it turned easily, unlocked. Before I knew it, I was inside, calling out Ryan's name. "Ryan!" As I entered the living room, I found Ryan alone, hugging his knees and crying in the dim room. "Where's your dad and mom?" I asked, shaking Ryan in my excitement, bombarding him with questions. "What happened?" Seeing my face, Ryan started crying louder. They said they're going to Hawaii, just the family. It seemed they had deliberately misled Ryan before leaving for a family trip without him. Such malicious behavior is not something adults should engage in. I felt shame and anger at what my son had done.
Grandma, I don't want to be here anymore. Help me,
Ryan said with a clarity I had never heard from him before. After hearing more from Ryan, I was filled with intense anger towards Kyle and his family. Ever since Sam and I confronted the company, Kyle and his family's treatment of Ryan had become even harsher. Ryan's situation had become increasingly perilous since it became known he had confided in me.
We took you in, and this is how you repay us. We're like criminals to you now.
Yasmin had always found Ryan bothersome and treated him harshly, seizing any excuse to scold him all day long. Like Steve, Ryan, kind and earnest, started believing maybe he was to blame, as if he had caused them discomfort despite doing nothing wrong. Tormented by guilt, Ryan apologized to Kyle and his family. "I'm sorry for saying things that made you doubt me." Then, unexpectedly, Kyle spoke to him.
"We're going to Hawaii the day after tomorrow as a family, so be ready for that."
Even though his apology didn't change their treatment of Ryan, the sudden news filled him with joy. I must have been wrong. If I apologize sincerely, good things will happen. Innocent Ryan was overjoyed by Kyle's words. Hastily packing his favorite clothes, excitedly waiting for the day, wondering what Hawaii would be like. But when the day came, Ryan was once again plunged into despair.
"What? Why do I have to take you with us? We're going on a family trip. You're not my real family, so you're staying behind."
Kyle's words mocked Ryan, who had woken up early and finished preparing.
"What do you mean?"
"Dad, Mom, he actually thought he was going with us. He even packed a big bag. It's just too funny." Juliana laughed mercilessly at Ryan, who stood frozen, unable to comprehend Kyle's words. For the first time, Ryan realized he had been deceived by Kyle and his family. It was a cruel trick, letting him think he was included only to shatter that hope. Though he had endured many forms of mistreatment, this was an undeniable act of malice. While the three of them laughed, Ryan silently cried.
"Come on, I told you, we're going to Hawaii as a family. You're not really part of it."
Kyle smiled satisfactorily, seeing Ryan shocked. They must have thought of themselves as the only real family, but now Ryan should understand. He was an inconvenience, expected to leave the house by the time they returned. Having secured the inheritance and the company, Kyle planned this to break Ryan's spirit and drive him away. They left Ryan behind, laughing as they left the house.
"Family's great, huh? Dad, Mom, I want to eat steak when we get to Hawaii."
Their laughter lingered in Ryan's ears, refusing to leave. That's when I came to see Ryan. If that's the case. I thought of a plan I had considered before, now feeling it was the right time to act. Hugging Ryan, who looked up at me with teary red eyes, I made up my mind. I was determined to make Kyle and his family feel the betrayal they had inflicted. A few days later, we were waiting for Kyle and his family of 3 to return from Hawaii.
"Hey, why is Mom even in my house? And who's that woman?"
Kyle, tanned from the trip, said this while holding loads of luggage. Indeed, waiting for Kyle's return were not just me and Ryan. Standing beside us was a woman named Nicole.
"Nice to meet you. My name is Nicole. I'm Steve's biological mother and this child's blood relative,"
Nicole said, bowing deeply while giving the returned trio a sharp look. It was I who had called Nicole here. Recently, Ryan told me about the repeated harassment from Kyle and his family, along with their taking Steve's inheritance and company from Ryan, who is still a child. Given these facts, I reached out to Steve's real mother, Nicole, who was also an old friend of mine. Nicole had given birth to Steve, but her husband ran off with debts and a mistress. leaving her unable to care for young Steve amid daily demands for debt repayment. My husband and I, upon her consultation, decided to adopt Steve. Nicole, fearing the burden on Steve, wanted to distance him from herself and worked tirelessly to pay off the debts after moving away, not letting Steve know she was alive at her own request. She planned to reveal herself only after paying off her debts. But a tragic accident occurred just when she was about to contact Steve. Reality was too cruel. Although Nicole was aware of Ryan's existence, she confided in me that she felt she no longer had the right to take him in. Ideally, living with Nicole, his biological grandmother, would have been best for Ryan. However, considering my feelings, Nicole declined. I convinced Nicole to come this time to save Ryan, persuading her that this was the only way. Nicole struggled with the decision to reveal herself, but was moved by my words for Steve's sake and decided to help Ryan. I believe it was a decision of great courage, encompassing guilt, regret, and the sorrow of having lost Steve without being able to do anything. Swallowing all that, Nicole now stood confronting Kyle and his family.
Kyle, I heard you told Ryan he's not real family. That's clear abuse. Ryan sought my help. Unfortunately, I can't leave him in your care any longer.
I threw these confident words at Kyle, who still couldn't grasp the situation, while Nicole nodded silently to my words.
Don't understand? Your adoption of Ryan has been dissolved. From today, Ryan will be considered Nicole's grandson, part of her real family,
I said, laden with irony, to the three of them. Kyle, who hadn't fully grasped my words, continued.
You just come here to say that? Please, go ahead, do whatever you want. To be clear, that kid.
As Kyle was about to continue, Nicole cut him off. Her tone was so cold it even made me shiver.
It's truly sad to have such a wonderful mother and end up like this,
she said, pitying Kyle from the bottom of her heart. Despite Nicole's words, Kyle and Yasmin remained arrogantly unbothered, as if nothing said mattered to them.
It doesn't matter whether you agree or not, but naturally, all of Steve's inheritance and the company now belong to Ryan. Sam will manage the company until Ryan can take over.
I explained the facts decided over the past few days while Kyle and his family were enjoying Hawaii. Kyle and Yasmin's faces turned pale, moving from smirks to shock.
What did you just say? The inheritance and company belong to Ryan. Don't spout nonsense,
Kyle screamed at us, almost lunging, desperate.
That's a lie. Impossible. Thieves. Give it all back.
Yasmin, too, was shrieking, frothing at the mouth. No matter what they said, the decision had been made. The numerous acts against Ryan were officially recognized as abuse. Nicole now became Ryan's guardian. And naturally, all of Steve's inheritance intended for Ryan was returned to him. Similarly, the company's rights will be entrusted to Ryan, who has a parent-child relationship with Steve. Well, to be more precise, Ryan has always held these rights. I'm not entirely sure about the specifics, but Sam, through the company's lawyer, proved that Kyle had no authority as the president. This reality hit Kyle even harder.
It's really unfortunate to do this to your own son, but the police will be coming to talk to you.
It turns out that Kyle and Yasmin were treating Ryan much worse than we knew, but he had kept silent until now. Feeling safe under our protection, Ryan opened up about everything. Without hesitation, I contacted the police and reported the facts. We were waiting for Kyle and his family to return from their trip for the police to arrive.
This is nonsense. The company and the money, they're mine.
Kyle lost his composure, to which I delivered the final blow.
You really can't do anything without Steve, can you? Everyone at the company, adults all, chose Ryan over you, a mere child. It's truly pitiful that my own son lost to such a young boy.
At my sharp words, Kyle was left speechless, realizing for the first time his incompetence that had been sustained only by Steve's kindness. Ryan watched Kyle intently, his expression indescribable. It didn't seem to carry anger, rather, it felt like pure pity for Kyle. Soon after, as promised, several police officers arrived. The atmosphere was filled with an eerie silence due to Kyle sitting dejectedly on the floor and Yasmin and Juliana crying out. The police officers looked at me and Nicole, who explained the situation on their behalf, with sympathy. "Is your grandson safe?" After hearing directly from Ryan, the officers were relieved to see him unharmed. I identified Kyle and Yasmin as the individuals involved, pulling Juliana away as she screamed. "Dad! Mom! What's going to happen to me?" Having witnessed the treatment towards Ryan, Juliana understood what was coming for the two. While it pained me to think about Juliana's future, considering she had also partaken in harassing Ryan. Being a child doesn't excuse her actions. She needs to acknowledge her dishonest deeds and reflect properly. The police officers then left, stating they would conduct a formal interview with Kyle and Yasmin later. As we watched the police car drive away, Juliana burst into tears. Despite being victims, Nicole and Ryan seemed to genuinely pity her. Later, Ryan and I were called by the police, who had finished interviewing Kyle and Yasmin, admitting to most of their crimes. It was to confirm if their statements were correct. After leaving the police station, Ryan worriedly muttered, "Will Kyle and Yasmin be arrested? What will happen to Juliana?" Ryan was more concerned about the three of them than himself. Watching him, I couldn't help but feel tears welling up. Juliana would be taken in by Yasmin's parents. Kyle and Yasmin, of course, would face the consequences of their actions. Having lived off Steve's estate, they lost everything and will struggle even after serving their time. Given Kyle's inability to work and his criminal record, how will society view Kyle, who couldn't work properly and committed crimes, despite being able to belong to the company only through Steve's kindness? Yasmin and Juliana will not be able to return to their previous lives. My heart ached at such an outcome. The only consolation was considering Ryan's future. After discussing with Nicole and Ryan, it was decided that Ryan would live with me. Even though Nicole is his biological grandmother, Ryan was hesitant to live with someone who suddenly appeared in his life. Nicole sensed this and suggested that he live with me instead. The change is that Nicole can now visit Ryan anytime. A decision made after thorough discussion between them. I was, of course, thrilled to live with Ryan and approved wholeheartedly. With Kyle gone, Steve's company returned to its normal state. The employees, relieved at Kyle's departure, with those who had announced their resignation returning. Sam came to report to Steve's memorial and thank me. "Thank you so much for everything. I'm relieved we could protect the company Steve entrusted to us. I'll make sure to safeguard the company until Ryan is ready," Sam said with tears in his eyes. Though Steve is no longer with us, what he left behind is significant. Steve was undoubtedly my son, even if not by blood. Thinking about it fills me with pride. I wonder if I managed to raise Steve as Nicole entrusted him to me. Suddenly, Steve's always gentle smile comes to mind. I bite my lip, desperately holding back tears. Raising Ryan, who carries on Steve's will, is now my important duty. Next month, Nicole, Ryan, and I are planning to go on a trip together. Ryan is already so excited, researching our destination every day. This time, for sure, nothing will hurt Ryan's heart. A genuine family vacation.